Ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. Welcome back. The next session, Bridging the Cultural Gap, the role of culture in shaping global governance, is brought to us with collaboration with the Club de Madrid, which is one of the most exclusive clubs in the world because it's ex-prime ministers and presidents, world leaders who, in a sense, are unconstrained by the pragmatics of power and whose knowledge can be harnessed in all sorts of different ways, which is what we're going to do now. The session is chaired by Eric Alter, who's the Dean of the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy here in Abu Dhabi. Please welcome them all to the stage. Thank you.
First of all, Excellencies, colleagues and friends, a very warm welcome to you all and to this new and 7th edition of the Culture Summit, and particularly for attending this first panel organized with Club de Madrid, the largest forum of former democratic presidents and prime ministers. Today we count on the very special participation of individuals with a unique experience. They have traveled, some of them from very far, to be with us. So please welcome Prime Minister Jenny Shipley, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Iveta Radičová, the former Prime Minister of Slovakia.
Hello.
And Kassam Utim, the former president of Mauritius. In this present edition of the Culture Summit 2025, we come at a very specific time when the world is living a state of profound disruption and is facing very distressing challenges. Geopolitical tensions, fragmentation, economic equality, growing environmental crisis. The global order is under unprecedented strain. In this context, governments and multilateral institutions are struggling to find sustainable solutions to maintain stability and rebuild trust between nations and communities. Yet, amid this complexity, there is an undeniable force that has always served as a bridge between peoples and societies. And this force is culture. Culture, because it's through culture that civilizations have historically found common ground, fostered dialogue, and shaped their collective identities. And today, more than ever, culture must be seen not as a secondary concern, but as a vital instrument of diplomacy, reconciliation, and governance. So instead of considering culture as a passive reflection of societies, we have to consider it as an active force, able to shape them. Political and economic agendas have often taken precedence, as you well all know, leaving cultural consideration on the periphery of decision-making processes. But as we face growing polarization, rising extremism, and deepening divides, the need to integrate cultural policies into global governance has never been more urgent. And the recognition of culture as a strategic tool for peace and international cooperation has been steadily gaining ground in recent years. Organizations like the United Nations or UNESCO have led crucial efforts to position culture as a fourth pillar of sustainable development alongside, obviously, economic, social, and environmental consideration. For culture to fill this role effectively, it must be given the institutional recognition it deserves. This means inserting cultural policies at the highest levels of decision-making, not simply as an afterthought, but as an integral part of diplomatic strategies or international treaties or peace negotiations. We must move beyond seeing culture as something to be protected in times of peace and merely restored after conflict. If we have to bridge, and this is the most interesting part of our discussion today, and reshape global governance, we must commit to placing culture at the heart of our global priorities. And today's panelists have first-hand experience in shaping policies that recognize culture as an essential driver of governance, cooperation, and reconciliation. So let me first turn to Prime Minister Jenny Shipley. It's a great honor, as we said before, to be with you today. New Zealand, as everybody knows, is renowned for its deep cultural heritage, known also for stunning natural landscapes, it goes without saying. And it has been a long time a global advocate for sustainability and social inclusion. So during your tenure, you led the country through a period of economic reform while ensuring social and cultural values at the same time, and that they remained at the heart of decision making. So as a former leader of a nation with a rich indigenous heritage and a strong environmental commitment, we would like to hear more precisely maybe what are the main challenges a political leader in general, but you in particular, face when integrating cultural heritage into national development policies, and more precisely maybe what type of recommendations you could come up with to offer to today's policymakers to ensure that economic growth goes with protection and promotion of cultural identity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. These are huge questions. Culture is the color in any society. If we take time to think, it has many threads: the artists, the leaders, the musicians, the politicians. None of us can detach ourselves from this. And in New Zealand, there have been 2 or 3 journeys that I think add color to these threads that have bound us together. Even though we're a young nation, we're a nation that values culture at the center of who we are, and that's not always been true. So let me touch on 2 things. Inclusive leadership is not just a notion, it's got to be a lived experience. Leaders have got to, in a determined way, commit themselves to including those values and attributes and elements that make us unique, and yet allow the independence of being who we are, but finding the threads that bind us together. In New Zealand, the inclusion of women has been a very important cultural feature. It was the first nation on earth to give women the vote. And I raise it because it wasn't a representative question, but rather women and men should share this responsibility of this young nation. Our Maori women were given that vote at the same time. And it has become a part of who we are. We've had 3 women prime ministers, as some of you will be aware. And I raise the point because it's not a representative question, but rather a commitment by our New Zealand voters. They won't choose a political party that doesn't have women and men who are capable and committed to living who we are, bringing our cultural heritage forward. And that's true with our Maori people as well. We started with some designated seats, but over time, the valuing of our Maori culture and wanting to have that knowledge and values within our government structure led the political parties to want to include Maori within the political system. And even today in New Zealand's parliament, 23% of our parliamentarians whakapapa or connect back to Maori. They only make up 18% of the population. These reasons are important, because if you have a strong and deep sense of identity in cultural terms, it does inform your future. And if you were to come to New Zealand, you would get this deep sense of, we look back toward the future. So we cherish the heritage, the culture, the language, the artistic features of Māori, and it's increasingly becoming who we are as a population. Not the same, but respecting the difference, the tino rangatiratanga, the independence of Māori within a flourishing democracy, to be able to be heard, but then us all hold the tiller of the vessel that will take us forward. And remember, New Zealand has a huge voyaging history, so this analogy sits richly in the heart of culture. We navigate celestially in order to get to New Zealand, and in the future we also think about, so how do we pull the threads of culture, who we are, what we cherish, how we reference the decisions that we have to make. So for example, the environmental decisions that New Zealand takes, any big development has to reference our Indigenous people and their knowledge and values, not just science, not just modern science. So knowledge and science steeped in culture shape the future that we are interested in navigating. But I want to conclude on this point. This is not a small young society that's lost its way. If you were to come and find the young leaders of the future, I met a very inspired young leader, a young Māori man, got off to do a medical degree. And he said to me, I don't want you to hold us back in our history. So don't trap us in our culture. Use it to enable us. And he was talking about, my ancestors came from Hawaii, which is almost an imaginary nation in terms of their identity, and they voyaged to New Zealand to settle as people. And he was saying to me, I want to get hold of the tiller and find the new Hawaii that has AI at its center, that has culture steeped in our values of who we are, but we can define where we go from there. And for him, it was a rich, deep strength rather than an add-on. And so my cherished question for all leaders today is, as a committed, inclusive leader, it's got to be intentional. It's not nice to have or in addition. You have to actually want to own this space. And for my own part, I never start with the conversation of DEI. I always start with the I, because if you're not a committed, inclusive leader, you will not get to the destination you're talking about. Equity, you won't get there unless you're committed. And if you achieve diversity, then you will have a rich cultural nation which can shape a future worthy of us all.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, we will come back to inclusion, diversity, and sustainability as part of what we do at cultural level. But if I might relay with another question connected to the world we live in, fragmented, as we said, and culture being able to act as a unifying force. However, access to culture, and this is the sense of my question, remains largely unequal. So how can you describe the key challenges in ensuring that cultural expression, heritage, and creativity are truly accessible to all? How can you phrase that nowadays?
One of the steps we took was made the Māori language an official language. So government can indicate that English and Māori sit side by side in a legislated sense. We, in the 1980s, when the language was almost lost, introduced programs that led to the complete recovery of the language today. It's taken 35 years. But Māori is now widely spoken, Māori music is flourishing, Māori arts are flourishing, and I think it's that respect and mutual acknowledgement. In global terms, we need to carry these ideas forward, and the Pacific, by the way, is rich in the way we think about this. You know, our historic connections bind the way in which we view the future. And it's really, again, it's a matter of commitment, of respect and understanding of people's different cultural perspectives, but trying to find that middle ground, the meeting of minds, rather than demanding that people are the same. And in institutional senses globally, again, I want to come back to the difference between representation and being a genuine participant. I often go to international conferences and we are observers. I often ask myself what it will take for us to each genuinely be a participant in these journeys we are discussing. And that means ownership of the concepts of inclusion and commitment to bringing the cultural threads together with respect, but not demanding that people agree, but rather respect our differences. And actually the Club of Madrid that brings my colleagues and I together have a long-standing piece of work that is called Shared Societies that are safe for difference, but then allow us to find spaces in which we can navigate together. And this induces collaboration, it brings forward respect and understanding, it brings tolerance around different views, but it also has a determination of how do we move forward. So it's not a passive concept, but rather how do we bring the best experiences of others and then help others who are decision makers today to shape a future ahead of us. There's no silver bullet here. And actually the future lies in the hands of leaders in the cultural sector, leaders in the arts sector, you know, seeing that our work challenges the status quo, but also allows people to think about where these types of concepts take us forward. And without culture, we are living in a very bland space. With a cultural diversity and cultural enrichment, we have a reason to want to be in a flourishing space, sometimes one that's not comfortable. But on the other hand, it gives us a starting point from which we can move from what we don't know. And once we're exposed to cultural experiences, then we have insights that can take us forward into what we now know that allows us to move forward.
Thank you very much. Let's continue this cultural thread, as you said, with and change continent with Prime Minister Iveta Radičová. Slovakia certainly is a different country because it has lived a very different evolution. It has come from a centrally planned system to a modern European democracy, and you have lived deep political, economic, and cultural transformation. So as the country's first female prime minister of Slovakia and a leader who has also helped shape participation of Slovakia in the European Union, you have had probably to balance some national identity with European integration. But based on your experience, more precisely, how can leaders ensure that European integration strengthens than erodes national cultural identity, and what lessons you can give us on that count, if I may?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate very much. Really, I am few hours here, first time in my life, and I am really impressed. So thank you very much. If you do not mind, I am sociologist. To understand one experience, I need only few figures as a background. Few, I promise. 150 years ago, there were 800 million people on the planet. Today, it's 8 billion. These 8 billion people is divided officially, according to United Nations, to 195 states. Unofficially, 210. More, according to UNESCO, there are 6,000 different community groups with own languages and with own cultures. 6,000. If you, from this point of view, look at Europe, so Europe means that we are talking approximately about 50 states, approximately, because there are transcontinental states like Russia, Turkey, etc. So 50. Altogether 740 million inhabitants. But what is the most important is that in Europe we are using 225 languages. How we can communicate? It's first task. Okay, according to the Council of Europe, to have a bit easier way how to solve these differences, officially there are 80 languages in Europe. So I'm still not in European Union. Now, step to European Union and to your question. We are talking about 27 states. Today, 445 million inhabitants, but more than 90 nations inside, and more 160 small nationalities, ethnic groups with own cultural communities. And we tried to put this together. The only way is that you try to find common will and common good. One small joke, grandchild asked grandfather, "Come on, grandfather, tell me, a human being is good or bad?" And grandfather is looking on grandson and said, "You know, we both have inside, angel and devil." "Okay, grandfather, and who is the winner?" "Whom you give the food." So depends on us. If we are prepared to define common good, common aim, and understand unit as a unit of diversity. And if it's such, then we have major pillars. Effectiveness, it means economic union, our common market, and plus, at the same level and importance, legal state, human rights. And what is typical for EU, for European Union, are 5 major clusters of human rights: civic, political, social, economic, and cultural. That's it. We have agreed to have common regulations, to have common level how to satisfy all these needs, and plus we have non-discrimination laws. The dream is clear, reality is more complicated because it depends on political representation. Last comment, we are facing the change of paradigm, complex of uncertainties. It has started on 11 September 2000. That's truth. Do not forget. And continue with migration crisis, continue with financial crisis, once more in the United States, collapse of Lehman Brothers, and dynamo effect in other countries, continue with pandemia, continue with terrible war in Europe, Russian aggression against Ukraine, but before there was a 10 years war in former Yugoslavia. So not peace as we all wanted to have it. And it's very complicated to the continent which is capable each century to destroy himself to keep the peace and guarantee human rights. Therefore, the challenge today is how to answer the complex of uncertainties and to win with the new counter ideology based on populistcracy. And this is the major challenge. Plus, 10 technological giants are now the most powerful in the world. That's reality. They concentrate the major power, major financial resources. Look on the power of Elon Musk in the United States, but also the others. We are living online and offline, and the word online is unregulated and is the basis of creating new identities, closed in own bubbles based on totally new group identities based on expressions. What do we know about these bubbles? How to connect these closed group identities? And this is absolutely new challenge also for culture. Look, AI is producing movies, advertisements, speeches for politicians, deep fakes, everything. And I would conclude this question to continue what we have heard from the CEO of Google X. Really depends on political representation if AI will be the instrument to create common good, or is the instrument to totally destroy human dignity, human rights, and only help to keep the power in the hands of autocrats. And this is the major challenge also for next years and today.
Thank you for bringing the point of view of the sociologist in you and the leader at the same time. I think it brings great considerations to our topics. And if we are to manage complexity, as you say, because this is what we are trying to do, and for the common will and the common good, so how in our polarized societies nowadays can we ensure that we get this constructive dialogue? How can we make sure that cultural debates remain at the forefront or as a source of democratic engagement coming from Europe?
If I know, I have a Nobel Prize. But we are here to discuss how to do it. Because only through dialogue we can find solution. But my experience, you have to always have to check the power. Power has to be under the control. And to be under the control mean independence not only of media, but freedom for cultural production. Freedom. How to establish freedom for whole cultural production? There are several examples how to do it. We have done in my small country, which, by the way, consists of more than 10 nationalities and 18 churches. Multi-cultural country. We have created independent fund to support cultural production, all kinds of culture, from art to mass, doesn't matter, and they themselves are deciding whom and how they will support. There is a budget for them. They have created their own working groups from different branches of culture. Politicians have no possibility to influence these decisions, so self-management of whole cultural sector, and sure, they are also responsible for concrete results at the end of the day. So to keep them independent and freedom is the major instrument for quality of cultural product. You can, yes, there is a part of culture propaganda, yes, based on ideology, ordered by governments, but I am not talking about propaganda. I am talking about real free cultural products, because culture is the major mirror of human existence and producer of new dreams.
Sure.
And without dreams, we are losing our human dignity.
This is a nice way to say it. May I turn to you, President Gassamu-Team? As we all know, probably here in Abu Dhabi, Mauritius is a successful example of multilateral coexistence. And from point of view of Abu Dhabi, we always look at examples of successful coexistence where diverse ethnic, religious, and linguistic communities have lived together peacefully while maintaining their distinct identities. This is a very important step. So during your presidency, and you did 2 terms in mandates, what were the key policies or strategies that were implemented to foster this national unity while ensuring cultural diversity among all your people?
Well, if you allow me, I'll start with a very brief historical presentation, which is important, actually very important to understand the context in which Mauritius evolved as a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-cultural society. 400 years ago, Mauritius was a desert island, situated some 2,000 kilometers off the southeastern coast of Africa. There was no indigenous population in Mauritius. Mauritians were all originally immigrants, and they are today the descendants of those immigrants, the offspring of the European colonizers, the offspring of African slaves, the offspring of Malagasy slaves, of indentured laborers, of Chinese traders. No indigenous population means no one particular ethnic group or community can lay claim to exclusive rights on the land, as is the case in certain countries which I wouldn't mention here. In Mauritius, all have access to land and can aspire to become landowners, and therefore land ownership is not a divisive issue. Mauritius was first discovered by the Arabs, by Arab navigators, and later colonized by the Dutch, the French, and the British. And we acceded to independence in 1968 on the 12th of March and became a republic in 1992. And ever since our independence, all the major political parties, including my own, and all political leaders have embraced the same motto, the same objective: unity in diversity. It will, of course, not be possible in a few minutes to refer to all the measures that have been taken over the years to consolidate national unity while celebrating cultural diversity. I shall mention just a few of them. First, in the field of politics, the Mauritian political system is largely based on democratic principles, with free elections, a multi-party system, and a commitment to human rights. the inclusion of the various ethnic groups in the political process ensures that communities are represented in Parliament, and this, of course, promotes peace and stability. We have ensured the adequate representation of all communities through an electoral system that we have adopted, and that is the first past the post, coupled with a unique mechanism. I say unique because I haven't heard about it anywhere else, except in Mauritius. That unique mechanism is known as the good loser system. The good loser system, which provides for 8 additional seats for minority communities who, after an election, would be underrepresented in a parliament constituted of 70 members. So no community would thus feel excluded from the legislature, from the decision-making body. And this creates, we believe, a sense of fairness and equity, which is essential, which is fundamental for peaceful coexistence, but also for sustainable development. Second, secularism. Mauritius is a secular state, but a secular state with a difference. Religion has always played a very important role in the average Mauritian's life. We believe religion has a very positive role to play in our society for the maintenance of peace and stability. And in recognition of that role, government annual budget provides for an annual grant in aid, a religious per capita subsidy to all the recognized and registered organized religions: Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam. And besides, a public holiday is annually granted on the occasion of each of the 4 religious festivals: Christmas, Chinese New Year, Diwali, Eid ul-Fitr. These festivals serve to promote cultural exchange. Ceremonies organized on the occasion of those festivals are attended by the President of the Republic, by the Prime Minister, by the ministers, by the opposition leaders of the opposition parties. Religion, therefore, in our country is a unifying factor. And thirdly, and the last measure I'm going to quote, education. Education in Mauritius is free from pre-primary to university, and equal opportunities are given to all children irrespective of their ethnic group. The educational system fosters national unity while respecting cultural differences. We have a language policy that at primary level encourages all children to learn their ancestral language. Currently, there are 13 different languages taught in our primary schools. All languages are therefore given equal importance. The state support for language diversity helps maintain cultural identities while promoting social inclusion and mutual understanding. So to sum up, good loser system in politics, religious per capita subsidy, and language policy, these are the 3 areas that have allowed for peaceful coexistence and a successful way of life in Mauritius, and that promotes unity and celebrates diversity.
Yeah, very fascinating features of the Mauritian construct, I would say, that you just described, and it ensures certainly the cultural diversity and preservation of the national identity. Since you were the leader of the of Mauritius, then you have been working since then, I guess, in international diplomacy, and so I would like to shift the conversation now from national identity system and the way of preserving culture to global governance, which is our main topic today as well. So how can we strengthen, how can we make sure cultural diplomacy is to strengthen multilateral cooperation and fostering, again, mutual understanding between nations? Can you give us a few examples that you have been dealing with, which ensure that in your international career you have been also understanding this topic as being very important to cultural diversity?
Well, cultural diplomacy, which, as you know, is also known as soft power diplomacy, is the exchange of cultural elements like art, music, language, and traditions between nations to foster mutual understanding and cooperation. An understanding of cultural norms, values, and customs is, I believe, vital for building effective relationships between states. It can help diplomats navigate sensitive issues and prevent misunderstandings, thus facilitating peaceful resolution of conflicts and the promotion of mutual respect. Different cultures have different approaches to economic systems, governance, and development. Some societies, for instance, prioritize communal values and social welfare, while others emphasize individualism and free market capitalism. The cultural values shape how countries and globe engage in global economic systems and influence their stances on issues like trade, development aid, and corporate responsibility. Global institutions like the World Bank must take account, and they do take into account, cultural differences in their approach to economic policies. For example, the promotion of market-driven economic policies in some developing countries may clash with local cultural values or social systems, and therefore cultural considerations must be integrated into economic decision-making process to ensure that global economic development is inclusive and respects local customs and values. You have been asking me a question about the international cultural politics that aim at promoting cultural diversity and understanding between nations, often through collaboration and exchange. It is a fact that small states, especially small island states, often find it difficult to make their voices heard in international fora. However, I'm pleased to tell you that Mauritius, though a very small island nation, has managed to play a notable role in shaping international cultural politics, particularly through its advocacy for cultural diversity, sustainable development, and the protection of intangible cultural heritage. Mauritius has always been a strong supporter of the UNESCO Convention on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. It uses its own model of peaceful coexistence and cultural plurality to advocate for equal representation of cultures, inclusion of Global South voices in policy making, promotion of intercultural dialogue. Mauritius has actively participated in the UNESCO Convention for the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. And between 2018 and 2022, Mauritius was elected as a member of the Intangible Cultural Heritage as a representative of the African region, bringing the perspectives of the small island developing states and multicultural societies into global discussions. We even hosted the 13th session of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee in Port Louis, Mauritius, in December 2018. It marked a major milestone. It was the first time an Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee session was hosted by small island developing states in the African region, and we welcomed some 800 delegates from over 130 countries. And the key outcomes of that session was that several new elements were inscribed on UNESCO's ICH list, including Mauritius' own what is called Geet Gawaiya, that is an Indian folk song, and Siga Tipik, which is the traditional Creole song and dance. And special focus was placed on the role of intangible heritage in sustainable development and peace building. And thanks to its leadership, Mauritius, as I said, though a very small country, helped to increase Africa's presence in global heritage discourse, support regional cooperation for capacity building in safeguarding heritage, and strengthen UNESCO Africa cooperation frameworks.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing to the fore this international framework on culture, which is very important. And it will help now, maybe in the minutes we are left with, to shape our conversation about what culture can bring to global governance, and more precisely, looking beyond the national level and knowing that global governance is a very difficult thing to describe, because it's not anymore what it used to be. It's much more diverse, and it's much more complex too, and it's an ever-evolving architecture. So taking into account all these elements, how do you see in the near future culture being more systematically integrated into the structures of international governance, not just as a symbolic gesture, but as something that is very meaningful and constitute a strategic pillar? Jenny Shipley, maybe first.
At the risk of being pessimistic, I think our existing institutions are to some extent ill-equipped to adopt innovative spaces. What I see at the moment are events just like this, where people are, for the reasons that my colleague pointed out, the populations within regions has massively increased, and the diversity of those populations massively increased, and so people are innovating in the way in which they are intersecting. And I do think there's huge space for people to be brought together in an event like this around cultural innovation, and bringing into its line of view the AI. Frankly, international institutions are not capable of being agile enough in this moment to do these things. And so we mustn't be bound by them, but rather look to the artists, the leaders who see an opportunity to both broadcast ideas, some of which are very new, and give us a glimpse of the future, which then allows those of us in our areas of responsibility to think about how that then positions us as to how we move. So I think we're in an extraordinary moment where the international architecture is having to think very deeply. And as I say, I'm not convinced that it's going to be able to be an early adopter of what is now an extremely complex but interesting new set of relationships. I think what we are seeing are new clusters of people who are willing to go and let's put one of the elephants in the room. China, with its innovation around using the concept of the Silk Roads to initiate future economic activity, is a very interesting relationship connector, which is seeking to then create new opportunities. You see in the Pacific, countries like Australia and New Zealand using different threads to try and connect, particularly in the rising oceans issue, where we try and listen carefully. There are huge cultural risks around the expectation of the impact there and working together. These are things that are not necessarily suited to international settings. My other colleagues may be more optimistic than I, but I've heard the reform argument going on for over 30 years. And I'm really at a moment where I think that we're looking for new leadership. And leadership in areas like the Middle East, there's been peace negotiations, which have been very groundbreaking. And for those of us who want to look at the cultural connections that can bring peaceful resolution plus economic opportunity, these are the important connections of the future. So bringing people together, listening carefully to the diversity, not just the political echelon, but the cultural echelon that often looks back to the depths in order to look forward to the future. And I want to leave my statement here. Let us be brave enough to use the past to inform the future in a highly innovative way. The past doesn't limit us. The past can enable us. And we're not constricted by post-Second World War architecture. We can be enabled by old connections that are benevolent, that are informed, that are often very simple, but put in a modern setting can amplify possibilities. And I think we're in a moment where AI tells us it will sweep up the knowledge of the past and present it in a way that has never been possible before. What we choose then to do with it, through our analytical minds and our leadership intent, bringing those threads of culture, but emancipating them into a future space, I think is such an exciting idea. You're talking about it here at this conference. And frankly, I want to hear more of these conversations. I'm sick of hearing reform of this and that, which has not proved itself capable. But even with the best of diplomats, many of whom I respect gratefully, I'm not convinced that they are going to deliver the sort of conversation that we desperately need today.
Thank you. Prime Minister.
I will say one word: truth. The major challenge of today is the ability to distinguish the truth and the lie, and therefore the manipulation of those who are not prepared to distinguish in between the truths based on the verified facts and truths based on constructions. We need to support all kind of education, knowledge, cultural instrument to help people to be oriented in this chaos, very often used against themselves and against the people, only to keep the power. I would like to say one example only. First Prime Minister who has used the disinformation and lying and has won election was Boris Johnson in Great Britain. He was the first one. And then there were others who have done the same. He, as you maybe know, has worked as a correspondent in Brussels, and he was the author of many titles around the world, how EU is doing stupid things like that we need to have the same size of bananas, etc. All this was not the truth at all. And Commission tried to react. It was 500 articles. You have no chance if there is only one institution trying rationally react on total stupidity. If something is stupidity, we have to say it's stupid and not to dance around. No way. If politician is stupid, we have to say he, she is stupid. If artists are producing something which really is very far from what we can call art, we have to say it. We have not only right, we have duty to do it. So my answer to any international organization is the only one. If you would like to rebuild social cohesion and solidarity around the world, you have to fight for truth and openly, without dancing around, with courage and with really verified arguments. And last but not least, really,
because we are running out of time and
last
like to wrap up.
sentence. It's very easy to win elections and tell you, darling, tomorrow you will be wealthy like Zuckerberg. No problem at all. I am lying and I know it. Nobody can promise more than politician. And it's on us to tell the people that, come on, they are not telling you the truth. Try to start to think, that's all. If we start to think once more, neither AI nor manipulator can push us to self-destroy future. Really.
Thank you. Going back to politicians, but more up to the point, culture ministers, and let me wrap up very quickly what I understood from this conversation. And none of you, I understood, has ever been a cultural minister, but you have shown in this panel that you all recognize that culture was an essential determinant in your action. You always thought about culture, and it was very present in your mind. So what we learn also is that it has to be done through national consideration as priorities, because it's very important to take that into consideration when shaping cultural understanding. It is about either preserving cultural heritage or cultural identity to foster national unity. And this platform, I would say, and this Culture Summit is an excellent preparation to what is to come, Mondial Cult 2025 in particular, of which we are going to speak very much. Let me just briefly ask, I know I'm out of the time, two things from the Diplomatic Academy I come from, about global order and global governance. And also about culture, very briefly, from what we can feel here. We always speak about global governance or global order, but what we are seeing now in the global order is more a transition of eras than a transition of orders. What we are seeing is a post-war Cold War coming to a close, and we have entered a new era. And this new era is marked by a very simple thing, but a very complex reality at the same time, which is strategic competition in an age of interdependence. Great powers and major powers are deeply interdependent, and they are also competitive. And this is the reality we are living in, and this is the reality that culture has to understand to be able to make a difference in the future. And the second thing is about culture itself. When we look at history, most of history was always hierarchical. It was all about power, emperors, prime ministers, presidents. But the reality is that we have always lived also with the town square below. We have always lived with not only the tower, but those who were able at a different level to be also innovative and connect with a network. And culture, I would say, is this network that is not only a strong and unique voice, but this network which unites and inspires and drives sustainable development and international cooperation. And it is with this hope, I would like to conclude, this hope, as you know, Emily Dickinson, the poet, was saying, and was trusted to be the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, that I would like to leave us all, but not without having first thanked and applauded our panelists for all their valuable and timely comments, suggestions, and recommendations. Thank you all.